At a New Year's Eve party, my wife said, "Your sister-in-law lost her job, so you'll be covering my family's payments for a while." My aunt chimed in with a smile and that familiar line, "Family helps family." I calmly replied, "Okay. Then she can stay at your house, because I'm..." Before I finish that sentence and tell you how one holiday night flipped my entire life upside down, do me a small favor, stick with me, and if stories like this hit close to home, make sure you support this one so it reaches the people who need to hear it. I'm Adam Cole. I'm 36 years old. And until that night, I thought I understood exactly where my place was in my marriage and in my family. I was wrong. We were standing in my in-laws' living room, champagne glasses in hand, fake gold balloons drooping from the ceiling, everyone counting down to a new year they swore would be different. The music was loud, the smiles were loud, and underneath it all was that familiar tension I'd learned to ignore over the years. My wife, Lauren, looked stunning. She always did at family gatherings, perfect hair, perfect laugh, perfectly composed. To anyone watching, we looked solid, successful, stable. The kind of couple people quietly compared themselves to. What they didn't see was how often those comparisons came with expectations. Lauren's sister, Melissa, was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket even though the heat was on. She'd been quiet all night. No phone scrolling, no small talk. Just staring into her glass like it had personally betrayed her. I already knew what that meant. Silence like that always came before an announcement. Lauren squeezed my arm just before midnight. I assumed it was affection. I should have known better. When the countdown ended and everyone cheered, Aunt Deborah clinked her glass loudly. She had that tone, the one that meant she was about to say something important, in front of everyone so no one could object without looking heartless. "Well," she said brightly, "now that it's a new year, we should talk about family plans." My stomach tightened. Lauren didn't look at me when she spoke. She looked at her sister. "Melissa lost her job last month," she said casually, like she was talking about the weather. "Things have been really hard for her." I nodded slowly. That part wasn't new. Melissa had lost jobs before. Retail, office admin, a short-lived remote position that ended because, according to her, the company was toxic. And, Lauren continued, finally turning to me with a reassuring smile, "We talked about it, and you'll be covering my family's payments for a while. Just until she gets back on her feet." The room went quiet in that specific way families get quiet when they expect someone else to absorb the shock. Aunt Deborah nodded approvingly. "Family helps family," she added, like she was sealing a deal. I looked around the room. My father-in-law, Thomas, avoided eye contact. My mother-in-law, Elaine, suddenly became very interested in refilling her drink. Melissa didn't say a word. She didn't thank me. She didn't ask. She just waited. Because waiting had always worked. Here's the thing about me. I've always been the reliable one. The calm one. The one who does well and therefore, in everyone else's mind, must have extra. Extra money. Extra patience. Extra responsibility. I grew up believing that being dependable was the same thing as being loved. Lauren knew that. Her family knew that. And they had built an entire system around it. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Lauren blinked, like she hadn't expected a question. "Just the basics," she said. "Rent, utilities, car payment, groceries. Temporary. Temporary." That word had cost me more money than my first car. I did the math in my head anyway. Old habit. It wasn't a small number. It never was. "And how long is a while?" I asked. Melissa finally looked up. Her eyes were tired. Not desperate. Not embarrassed. Just expectant. "I'm applying everywhere," she said. "The market's awful right now." I nodded. "It always is." Lauren's smile tightened. "Adam." I raised my hand slightly, not aggressively, just enough to pause her. "Okay," I said. Relief flooded the room. You could practically hear it exhale. Aunt Deborah smiled wider. "See? I told you he'd understand." "But," I continued calmly, "then she can stay at your house, because I'm selling my entire property and walking out." The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was shock. Lauren stared at me like I'd switched languages mid-sentence. "What?" "I'm not funding another adult's life," I said evenly. "Not anymore. And I'm not doing it from inside this marriage either." Elaine gasped. Thomas finally looked at me. Melissa's face flushed red. "You're joking," Lauren said, her voice sharp now. "I'm not. You can't just decide something like that without talking to me." I met her eyes. "You decided I'd pay without talking to me. That's different." "No," I said quietly. "It isn't." Aunt Deborah scoffed. "This is dramatic." I smiled, but there was no humor in it. "So is announcing my financial obligations at a party." Lauren stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're embarrassing me. I shook my head. You embarrassed me when you volunteered my money like it belonged to the family. Melissa stood up abruptly. I didn't ask for this. I looked at her. You didn't stop it either. Her mouth opened, then closed. The truth has a way of doing that. Thomas cleared his throat. Adam, sit down. Let's talk this through. I've been talking it through for years, I said. Just not out loud. Lauren crossed her arms. So what, you're just leaving? Over money? I looked at my wife, really looked at her. This isn't about money, I said. It's about consent. Respect. And the fact that every time your family has a problem, I become the solution without being asked. That's marriage, she snapped. No, I replied. That's convenience. I grabbed my coat. Elaine started crying softly. You're tearing the family apart. I paused at the door. I'm stepping out of a role I was never supposed to play. Lauren followed me to the hallway. If you walk out now, she said, don't expect things to be the same. I opened the door. Cold air rushed in. I hope not, I said. I drove home alone that night. The house was quiet when I walked in. The house I paid for. The house I'd been proud of. The house that suddenly felt like a holding space, not a home. I sat on the edge of the couch for a long time, phone buzzing nonstop in my pocket. Messages from Lauren. From her aunt. From numbers I didn't save. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my laptop and typed 4 words. How to sell property fast. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was face down on the kitchen counter, vibrating itself inch by inch toward the edge like it was trying to escape. I didn't pick it up right away. I made coffee instead. Strong. Black. The kind Lauren hated because she said it was aggressive. I drank it standing at the counter, staring at the wall, replaying the night before, not with regret, but with this strange, unfamiliar clarity. For the first time, I hadn't apologized for existing. Eventually, I flipped the phone over. 23 missed calls. 17 messages. Most from Lauren. Some from her parents. One from Aunt Deborah that simply said, unbelievable. I opened Lauren's messages first. Adam, where are you? You embarrassed me in front of everyone. We need to talk right now. This is not how marriage works. You're being cruel. Cruel. I let that word sit there for a moment. Cruel was letting someone assume my money was theirs. Cruel was volunteering my future without asking. Cruel was wrapping entitlement in the language of family and love. I typed one message back. I'm home. We can talk tonight. Then I set the phone down again. By noon, Lauren came home early. I heard the door slam harder than necessary, the familiar sound of heels pacing across hardwood. She didn't greet me. She dropped her purse on the chair like it had personally offended her. So, she said, arms crossed, are you done with the tantrum? I turned slowly. If by tantrum you mean saying no for the first time in years, then yes. I'm done. She laughed once. Sharp. Humorless. You really think this is about you? I blinked. That's kind of the problem. It never is. She sat down, rubbed her temples. Melissa is my sister. And I'm your husband. She's struggling. So am I. No, you're not, she snapped. You have a house. A career. Savings. You're fine. There it was. Because I was functioning, I was expendable. Lauren, I said calmly, do you know how much money I've given your family over the years? She waved a hand. This again? Answer the question. She hesitated. I don't know. Some. I walked to the desk, pulled open a drawer, and slid a folder across the table. I'd never shown it to her before. Inside were bank statements, transfers, notes I'd kept quietly, because when you're constantly made to feel selfish, you start collecting evidence just to prove to yourself you're not insane. She flipped through it slowly. Her face changed. This can't be right, she said. It is. That's a lot. Yes. She looked up. Why didn't you say something sooner? I laughed softly. Every time I tried, you said, that's family. She closed the folder. Okay. Maybe things got out of hand. But selling the house? Walking out? That's extreme. Is it? I asked. Or is it the only move left when no one listens? She stood. You're punishing me. No. I'm removing myself from a system that only works when I bleed. That night, she slept in the guest room. 3 days later, I met with a realtor. A week later, the house was listed. 2 days after that, her parents showed up unannounced. Elaine cried immediately. Thomas didn't bother with emotion, he went straight to authority. This is irresponsible, he said, standing in my living room like it was still under family jurisdiction. Marriage isn't about ultimatums. Neither is consent, I replied. Elaine sobbed. Melissa is scared. She should be, I said gently. So was I, every time my savings disappeared. Thomas pointed at me. You're choosing money over family. I shook my head. I'm choosing boundaries over resentment. Lauren watched silently from the hallway. After they left, she said, you didn't have to be so cold. I wasn't cold, I said. I was done being warm for everyone except myself. The offers came fast. Above asking. The market didn't care about family guilt. The day the sale went pending, Lauren stopped pretending this was temporary. So what happens now? She asked that night. I'm moving, I said. And you need to decide if you're coming with me, or staying where I've always been expected to stand. She stared at me like she'd never heard that question before. 2 weeks later, she packed a bag. She didn't come with me. She went to her parents' house. The morning I drove away, the house was empty. Not sad, just hollow. Like a chapter already finished. I drove until the city signs changed. Until my phone stopped lighting up with familiar numbers. Until the road felt like possibility instead of escape. 3 hours later, I sat in a coffee shop I'd never been to before, sipping an overpriced latte that tasted like freedom and bad decisions, and smiling anyway. For the first time in years, my future felt quiet. And mine. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. That part was intentional. I rented a small furnished apartment under a short-term lease, neutral walls, cheap couch, nothing sentimental enough to guilt me into staying if I needed to leave again. The kind of place that doesn't ask questions. The kind of place that lets you breathe. For the first week, my phone stayed silent. Lauren didn't call. Her parents didn't text. Even Melissa, who had never once hesitated to ask for money, said nothing. That silence was louder than any argument. It meant they were waiting. They were waiting for panic. For regret. For me to come crawling back with apologies and explanations and a willingness to talk it out, which in our family always meant give in quietly. Instead, I unpacked. I set up my laptop near the window. I joined a local gym. I bought groceries without calculating whether someone else might need the money more than me. The smallest things felt radical. Then, on day 8, the calls started. It began with Lauren. I didn't think you were serious, she said when I answered. No hello. No how are you. Just that. I replied. You really sold the house. Yes. And you didn't tell me where you went. I told you why. She sighed. Everyone thinks you've lost your mind. I smiled to myself. That's usually what happens when the system stops benefiting from you. She was quiet for a moment. Melissa's rent bounced. There it was. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, genuinely. Lauren's voice sharpened. You could fix this with one transfer. I won't. So you're just going to let her spiral? No, I said calmly. I'm going to let her learn. That's heartless. No, I corrected. That's boundaries. She hung up. 2 days later, her aunt tried. Then her cousin. Then Thomas again, leaving a voicemail about responsibility and marital duty and what kind of man walks away like this. I deleted them all. What surprised me wasn't how angry they were, it was how quickly the narrative shifted. I wasn't overwhelmed anymore. I was selfish. I wasn't taking space. I was abandoning family. And Lauren? According to the grapevine, she was telling people she didn't recognize me anymore. That part hurt more than I expected. Because in a way, she was right. I didn't recognize myself either. The old Adam Cole would have already been negotiating. Compromising. Looking for ways to make everyone comfortable at the cost of my own spine. This version of me just didn't. Weeks passed. My savings grew. My sleep improved. The constant tightness in my chest, the one I'd always blamed on work stress, disappeared. Then, one afternoon, I ran into someone unexpected at a co-working space. Mark. An old friend from years ago, before marriage, before responsibility hardened into obligation. Adam, he said, blinking like he'd seen a ghost. Man, I heard you vanished. I relocated, I said. He laughed. Same thing, different branding. You okay? I thought about it. I'm better than okay, I said. I'm honest. We grabbed coffee. Talked about life. About how he'd cut ties with his own family years ago after they treated his success like public property. You don't owe people unlimited access just because they share your blood, or your last name, he said. That sentence stayed with me. A month after I left, Lauren showed up. I wasn't expecting her. I opened the door and there she was, eyes tired, posture rigid, like someone bracing for impact. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. She looked around the apartment. Took it all in. Smaller than our house. Simpler. You look different, she said. So do you. She sat. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't think you'd actually leave, she admitted. I thought you were just angry. I was exhausted, I said. There's a difference. She clasped her hands together. My family thinks you're punishing them. I'm protecting myself. They think you're punishing me. I met her eyes. You let them decide my future without me. She flinched. I didn't realize how bad it was, she said quietly. That doesn't undo it. She swallowed. I chose them. Yes, I said. You did. Silence stretched between us. Are you filing? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. I haven't decided, I said truthfully. But I won't go back to who I was. She nodded, tears welling. I don't know how to exist without them. I softened, not enough to bend, but enough to be human. I hope you figure that out, I said. But I can't keep paying the price while you do. She left an hour later. No yelling. No accusations. Just grief. That night, I sat alone and realized something that scared me more than any confrontation ever had. I was okay without her. Not happy about it. Not celebrating. Just, okay. And that meant the leverage was gone. 2 months in, Melissa finally reached out herself. A long message. Carefully worded. Apologetic, but slippery. She said she was sorry if things got misunderstood. She said she was doing her best. She said she never meant to make me feel used. Then she asked if I could help just this once. I didn't reply. 3 months in, I got promoted at work. More money. Less pressure. A clean slate no one felt entitled to. Lauren sent one last message. I think we grew into people who wanted different lives. I replied honestly. I think I finally chose one. She didn't respond. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Because sometimes walking away isn't abandonment. Sometimes it's survival. And sometimes, the bravest thing a man can do is stop being useful to people who only loved him for what he provided. By the 4th month, the silence had changed shape. It wasn't empty anymore. It was spacious. I'd stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. Stopped scanning messages for hidden guilt. Stopped rehearsing explanations in my head for decisions I was finally allowed to make without permission. That's when the consequences really started, for them. I didn't hear about it directly at first. It came sideways, the way family fallout always does. Mark mentioned it casually one afternoon while we were grabbing lunch. You know your in-laws' situation is not great, right? I raised an eyebrow. Define not great. He hesitated. Melissa moved back in with her parents. Again. This time with the kids. I leaned back in my chair. Didn't react. Apparently the rent kept bouncing, he continued. And your wife, ex-wife, was covering what she could, but without you, things got tight fast. Without me. Not because of me. Without me. That distinction mattered. Lauren reached out to HR at my old job, Mark added. Asked if you were okay. If work stress caused some kind of breakdown. I laughed once, quietly. Did they tell her? They said you're one of the most stable people there. That felt like vindication I didn't need, but appreciated anyway. A week later, I got an email from Thomas. Not a voicemail. Not a demand. An email. Subject line, let's talk like adults. I didn't open it immediately. I waited a full day. Then another. When I finally did, it was shorter than I expected. Adam, we are struggling. Melissa and the kids are here. It's not sustainable. Your decision has forced a lot of reflection. I won't pretend I handled things well. But families shouldn't fracture like this. Call me. Forced a lot of reflection. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Reflection wasn't the same as accountability. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Finally, I wrote. I'm willing to talk. I'm not willing to resume the old roles. If that's acceptable, we can have a conversation. He replied within 5 minutes. Agreed. We spoke the next day. His voice sounded older. Not softer, just worn. I didn't realize how much weight you were carrying, he said. I told you, I replied evenly. For years. He sighed. We thought you were okay. Because I didn't complain. Because you didn't say no. There it was. Silence filled the space between us. Melissa isn't coping, he admitted. Neither is Elaine. They don't understand how things unraveled so fast. I didn't jump in to rescue the conversation. That was a habit I'd broken. Finally, he said, what do you want? I thought carefully. I want you to stop treating generosity like an obligation, I said. And I want you to stop framing my boundaries as punishment. He didn't answer immediately. Can you help at all? He asked eventually. Just guidance? Advice? That question was different. I can give advice, I said. I can't give money. He agreed. And for the first time, it felt like a real boundary, not a negotiation disguised as one. That night, I went for a long walk. I realized something uncomfortable but freeing. If I'd stayed, they never would have learned. The system worked too well. A few weeks later, Lauren called. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. I moved out, she said. Where? I asked. A one-bedroom near my parents. Temporarily. How are you? She hesitated. Tired. Angry. Confused. That tracks. She exhaled. Melissa and I aren't speaking. She says I chose you over her. I didn't respond. Did I? She asked. I chose my words carefully. You chose what was familiar. I chose what was healthy. She was quiet. I don't know who I am without my family's expectations, she admitted. I didn't either, I said. That's why I left. I miss you, she said suddenly. The honesty surprised me. I miss who we were, she corrected herself quickly. Before everything turned into transactions. So do I said. And I meant it. But I won't go back to funding silence and resentment. I know, she said softly. I just needed to hear you say it. When we hung up, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Not every ending needs a villain. Sometimes it's just two people realizing love can't survive entitlement. 6 months in, my life had stabilized in ways I hadn't predicted. I cooked. I slept. I laughed without checking the emotional weather first. I even started dating, slowly. Nothing serious. Nothing heavy. Just proof that connection didn't have to come with invoices. One evening, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. This is Melissa. I almost ignored it. Almost. I owe you an apology. I waited an hour before responding. Go on. I blamed you because it was easier than blaming myself. Losing your support exposed a lot of things I didn't want to face. I read it twice. I'm in therapy now, she added. It's not comfortable. But it's real. I felt something. Not triumph. Not forgiveness. Respect, maybe. I'm not asking for anything, she wrote. Just wanted you to know I finally understand what you meant. I replied honestly. I hope it sticks. She didn't respond. And that was okay. Because growth doesn't require reconciliation. Sometimes it just requires distance. By the end of that month, Lauren and I finalized the divorce. It was quiet. Civil, almost gentle. No fights over money. No dragging each other through the mud. Just 2 signatures and a mutual acknowledgement that the life we'd built was propped up on expectations neither of us wanted anymore. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt something settle in my chest. Not loss. Closure. That night, I sat alone on my balcony, city lights blinking like a future that didn't ask for permission. I thought about the man I used to be, the one who mistook sacrifice for love. And I realized something important. Walking away didn't destroy my family. It exposed the cracks that were already there. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for fixing them. I was finally responsible for myself. By the time a full year had passed, I stopped measuring my life in before and after. It was just my life now. That realization came quietly, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, while I was standing in line at a grocery store arguing with myself about whether the organic eggs were worth the extra $4. No guilt. No background anxiety. No mental math calculating how much I might need to send someone later, just in case. Just eggs. That was when it hit me. I wasn't bracing for impact anymore. For years, my nervous system had lived in a permanent state of anticipation, waiting for the next crisis call, the next emergency text, the next carefully worded manipulation disguised as concern. Even after I left, part of me expected the other shoe to drop. That I'd get punished somehow. That I'd regret it. But nothing dropped. Life didn't collapse. It expanded. Work settled into a rhythm I actually enjoyed. Without the constant financial bleeding, my savings turned into investments. My weekends became mine. I traveled, not extravagantly, but intentionally. Short trips. New cities. Long walks where nobody knew my last name or expected anything from it. I learned something unexpected in that first year: peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or dramatic speeches. It sneaks in while you're doing laundry or cooking dinner or deciding what color couch you want because, for once, the decision affects only you. I stopped explaining myself. That was the biggest shift? At first, every new person I met got a shortened version of my story. A preemptive defense. But over time, I realized I didn't know anyone context for my boundaries. If someone asked why I didn't speak to my family much, I said, it wasn't healthy. And that was enough. The right people nodded. The wrong ones pressed for more. I stopped engaging with the wrong ones. Lauren reached out one final time, months after the divorce was finalized. Not emotional. Not accusatory. Just reflective. I'm starting to see what you meant, she wrote. Living near my parents again made it impossible to ignore the patterns. I didn't feel vindicated reading that. I felt distant. Not in a cruel way. In a healed way. I replied with kindness, not invitation. I'm glad you're seeing it, I wrote. I hope you build a life that doesn't require you to disappear in it. She thanked me. That was the last message we ever exchanged. Melissa, surprisingly, stayed consistent. Therapy turned into accountability. Accountability turned into stability. I heard through Mark, never directly, that she'd kept her job, downsized, stopped asking her parents for help, and for the first time, was actually budgeting. It was strange knowing my absence had forced that growth. But also validating. My parents changed more slowly. Elaine still believed family meant proximity. Still posted nostalgic photos and captions about missing pieces. Thomas softened, but never apologized outright. He started asking instead of assuming. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. And that was enough. We spoke once every few months. Neutral. Polite. Boundaried. They didn't ask for money again. That mattered more than words. 2 years in, my life looked nothing like it used to. I moved into a better place, still modest, but intentional. I started mentoring junior engineers, not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to. I volunteered occasionally. Gave when I chose to give, not when guilt demanded it. I even fell in love again. Not the kind of love that consumes you or asks you to prove yourself constantly. The kind that sits beside you and asks, "What do you want?" and actually listens to the answer. Her name was Claire. She didn't come from a loud family. She came from a quiet one. The kind that respected closed doors. The kind that didn't ask what you earned before asking how you were. When I told her my story, she didn't flinch. She said, "That must have been lonely." Not selfish. Not dramatic. Lonely. That's when I knew I was with someone who saw me. One evening, while we were cooking together, she asked a simple question. If they asked you to come back, really come back, would you? I thought about it carefully. No, I said. I'd visit. I'd talk. But I wouldn't shrink again. She smiled. Good. I realized then that the hardest part of my journey wasn't leaving. It was staying gone long enough to become someone new. Because leaving is dramatic. Staying away is quiet, repetitive, and deeply uncomfortable at first. It forces you to confront who you are without obligation propping you up. And that's terrifying, until it's liberating. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see at the beginning. I didn't abandon my family. I abandoned a role. A role that said my value was proportional to my sacrifice. A role that rewarded silence and punished boundaries. A role that slowly hollowed me out while everyone else stayed comfortable. Walking away didn't make me selfish. It made me honest. And honesty changes everything. If you're reading this and you feel that familiar knot in your chest, the one that tightens every time your phone rings with a family emergency, listen to it. That knot isn't love. It's conditioning. Love doesn't require you to disappear. Love doesn't invoice you emotionally or financially. Love doesn't call you selfish for needing air. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do isn't staying loyal to people who hurt him. It's choosing himself without apology. And if my story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the responsible one, the fallback plan, the unspoken solution, do me a small favor. Show your support by subscribing and comment where you are watching from so this story reaches others who might be standing at the same edge I once stood on. Sometimes, all it takes to change a life is knowing you're not alone.